Martin has joined us. Welcome, Martin.
Okay,
so thanks everybody. I think we're going live now, so we'll start the session. Just get back up to the start here. So this is for those who have landed here by accident, this is part of the EBDVF2020 series of tracks and sessions. We're virtually in Berlin at the moment. Some housekeeping rules before we get the session underway. Just that all participants, except the speakers and the chairs, will be muted by default during this session. If you have a question, please feel free to add it into the chat. And you can do that through the WOVA platform. And if there's any issues associated with getting connected, etc., you can contact the session facilitator, who's Anna Garcia, and you can do that through WOVA as well. This session is being recorded, and hopefully all of this will be available to you afterwards for those who are not unable to join us at the moment. I'm giving a shout out now at this stage to our sponsors, because without our sponsors' help, we wouldn't have been able to put on such a large virtual event with so many experts from all over the world speaking on AI, data, and robotics topics. And we are indebted to them, and we're very grateful for the support they have given us. So we're looking at a special session here in standardization, which is something I'll get to in a minute. And the title of this particular talk is going to be on technology interoperability, taking a 2030 view of it, so looking 10 years down the road. And so it's a foresight exercise. So we're going to talk about the evolution and the future challenges and opportunities afforded by AI, data, and robotics. I'll give a quick introduction to just who we're very lucky to have on our panel this evening. We have Thomas Hahn, who is the president of BDVA, Marta Nagy-Rothengas, who is from Eurostat, Fergal Finn from National Standards Authority of Ireland, and Martin Brinskoff. Martin is from Aarhus University and chair of Open and Agile Smart Cities from OASC. So, but I don't think I could do any intro for those guys, so I'm going to allow them to do an introduction as part of their talk. So just to get the juices flowing and maybe talk about AI, data, and robotics and where we are. And just, it's been mentioned a few times, like, that, and in relation to standardization, because that's the core of these sessions, is that standards and standards documents, and I've said this time and time again, it's a quote that's been thrown back at me a number of times now at this stage, is that standards are living documents. They evolve with the technology, and there's nothing moving faster than AI, data, IoT, and robotics. It's moving at exponential rate at the moment. And there's lots of reasons why that's happening. Like it's nearly a perfect storm in relation to what's happening within the ICT ecosystem of ecosystems. And that's the way I see it, that there's lots of ecosystems which form a large digital ecosystem, or the ICT ecosystem. And those ecosystems are cloud, big data, AI, IoT, smart cities, green, quantum, digital twin, all of them. They all link together, and they're blockchain, I forgot about blockchain, but they all link together, and they're so overlapped, and there's so many like sort of Venn diagram overlaps for those ecosystems that it's impossible to separate them out. There's just so many synergies in between them. And that's good, because it means that at the borders of these ecosystems, there's some really disruptive technologies happening, and new opportunities, business opportunities, technological opportunities, environmental opportunities, societal opportunities all happening. And that's good. And it's good for standardization as well, because with all of this, with the acceleration of the digital transformation process, we're in a situation where this disruptive technologies, as they come along, the AIs, the data, and the robotics, they suddenly there's an explosion facilitated by the technology, and you end up with all these new solutions. And that can lead to chaos. If you get lots of disruption happening all of the time, it can lead to chaos. And what happens is, in my view anyway, is that standardization comes in, okay? And we say, right guys, look, too much of this chaos going on. We need to calm down, and we're going to have survival of the fittest, okay? So you have the best solution. We're going to standardize you, okay? You have the best solution. And do all of you agree? Yeah, okay, we'll have come to a consensus. Yeah, you all agree this is the best solution. Excellent. Right, we're going to standardize that solution, and we're going to do it globally. We're going to do it not just in Ireland, not just in Europe. We're going to do it globally. We're going to get all the national bodies to agree that this is the best solution. And then that stabilizes, because confidence is then given to the community, to the citizen, and the citizen says, hey, look, every country in the world nearly has signed up to this standard. This can't be bad. We've all the best experts in the world have been working on it. This can't be bad. So this is where we're coming from. So we're going to adopt this solution, and that stabilizes all of that chaos, that disruption. Now, disruption is good, don't get me wrong, but it needs to be controlled as well, stabilized. And just when you think it's safe to go back in the water and it's all calmed down, next disruption comes along and we've got quantum, digital twin, and we start the whole process again. We start getting the co-evolve the standards with the technology as fast as possible. And open source is in there as well. And we haven't just European technologies that we have to deal with, like, you know, so we can have our own national standards with NSAI or BSI or DIN or AFNOR, or we can have European standards with ETSI and Senelec, you know, which are the recognized standards development organizations by the European Commission. But there are also standards coming from organizations, consortia, open standards, I think professional organizations, IEEE, the World Economic Forum, you know, United Nations, ITU, for example, they all have their own standards developing, standard setting organizations. And that's the scene that we're in at the moment. And we're trying to take a foresight exercise now to say, well, let's look off into the future, 10 years into the future, and track where we're going. What's the evolution of where we have been, you know, in relation to industry, research, partnership with the European Commission, public-private partnership in particular, and where has it been going and where is it heading? And can you see any challenges and opportunities with where it's heading in the next 10 years? And have we some potential solutions? And yeah, I think that's a good setting of the scene as far as I'm concerned. There's lots to think of there. And with that in mind, then I'm going to just throw it over to my experts, the guys that have actually agreed, handpicked by me to come on this panel. So the experts that I think are going to be able to tell me, you know, some of the possible solutions and ways out of this, you know, where are we going, you know, some challenges, some opportunities, and give us a long-term view. So we'll go through a round of, we'll try and come up with some questions for each of the individual panelists based on their talks, and maybe just some takeaway comments at the end. So that's more or less going to be the structure of our panel session this afternoon. Without any further ado, because I'm only a host here, I'm not going to talk anymore, I'm going to bring in the experts here now. And first up is Thomas Hahn. So Thomas is going to start unmuting himself and get ready to go. He's a chief expert software at Siemens AG, which is not a big enough title for him. He's actually the president of BDVA, and Thomas is responsible for a lot of what you've seen here today. So Thomas, without any further ado, you can pick up here and give us all things AI, data, and robotics.
Okay, Ray, many thanks. And now I learned we were handpicked, so you selected it, you know, not randomly, because you want to have it, us here in the panel. And yes, I will speak a little bit. Title of the panel, of course, is Technology Interoperability. And maybe to give you a feeling, and you know, like Ray said, I have different hats on my body. First of all, with Siemens, as you can read. I'm president of the Big Data Value Association, but I'm also president or member or active in different initiatives. There's, you know, one issue is regarding an consortia-based standardization body, is the OPC Foundation, where we're speaking a lot about IoT connectivity from cloud to sensor. Sorry, it was too fast. From cloud to sensor, where we're speaking also with industry partners about how you can describe a machine, an asset, and system and plant, also all the semantic definition of the machine, which is of course done from the persons or from the institutes who are taking care and knowing what is behind the systems. And like Ray said correctly, OPC is consortia-based, also not a consensus-based, and we are doing a lot of parallel. So we are doing defining the standards, proving the standards, filing the standard in ISC, for example, somehow in parallel, meaning also to reflect what Ray mentioned, the speed, and to do it in a fast way is absolutely necessary, especially when you're speaking about the AI, data, and robotics topic. Then, you know, I'm in the platform industry 4.0 and also with some kind of testing network. And I will give you also a glimpse how we are doing this, and let's say giving also hopefully some fruitful input how we can set it up to improve this fast circle between ideas, standardization, feeding back, proving the standards, and so on, let's say in some kind of fast and agile way. Last but not least, and it would be my next slide, I'm, let's say, also the main contact for the AI data and robotics partnership, which will be, let's say, be active starting soon. So we have done with our partners from Claire, Alice, Your AI, and Your Robotics some kind of proposal for this partnership, and now we're in the process to set it up. But maybe Ray, just to go to this next slide, only to give you some feeling what's happening in this area. You know, we are started. By the way, it was in the not in the last, but the previous one, European Big Data Value Forum in Vienna, where we have started these activities originally between robotics and BDVA. You see this here on the left slide. Then we have filed in several steps a joint vision, 2 3-letter documents, and we have, together with the partners, like mentioned before, in May 2020, we published then the partnership proposal, which now is formed under the topic AI data and robotics, public-private partnership. And as you can see, this we have done this between the 2 associations, BDVA and Euro Robotics, but we have done this also with our colleagues from the 3 AI communities, Alice, Claire, and Euro AI. And this is important to come back also to Ray's word. We have also a partner network, which you see here from EXO, from ETP for HPC, but also with Senelec, for example, because when we are defining something in the area of AI, data, and robotics, and of course we have all to make the loop back to the standardization bodies. Not only, like I mentioned before, for the consortia based like OPC, what I haven't the example just before that, but also when we're speaking about consensus-based standardization topics. And now we are just on the way, and this is to the right side. We will just close to make together the signature for this topic, and then the first calls and so on coming out in this AI data and robotics partnership. So that's only to give you some background. Ray, please to the next slide. And now I want to show you here a little bit. You see here on the left side, this is let's say one document out of the strategic research and innovation and deployment agenda for this AI data and robotics partnership. And you see here the 5 working areas where we're speaking about ecosystems, where we are speaking about skill acceptance, where we are speaking about innovation and market enablers, where we are speaking about promoting research and excellence, but for sure we have also regarding guiding standards and topic what we want to achieve and what to address. So, and what was some kind of let's say topic which we are doing this, and here I'm reflecting a little bit in my work which I'm doing in other association. You know, so you have on the one side what you see on the top, the partnership. This is driving the innovation, driving the ecosystem, proposing let's say the standardization need, proposing technology, facilitating or orchestrating the ecosystem, but providing also input to standards and regulation on the one side, and on the other side, setting up also some kind of network where you can prove the standards, where you can test technology, maybe where you can get out of the testing some new standards, meaning always for me it's important that when you are speaking about standardization, especially in this agile and fast area around AI data and robotics, then you have to have this, you know, I say it also a triangle where we have the initiative, we have the standardization, and where we have the improving testing and elaborating of standards. And how you traverse this, let's say this triangle is not so important, but you have to look at the different dimension: partnership, testing, regulation, or testing, regulation, and partnership, and so on, to drive this forward. This is, let's say, in a very short and brief update where I'm coming from, and I'm more than happy to discuss this later with you in the panel. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Very, very insightful as usual, and it gives a good run through of where we have evolved in the PPP partnerships and also the direction of where we're going as well. So without any further ado, my next expert panelist is Marta Nagel-Rothengas, and Marta is currently the head of unit of B5 Data and Metadata Services Standards at the European Commission's Eurostat, and previously had other hats, and I would have known her back when she was in DG Connect and was closely well, actually was, I think, was one of the key people responsible for the big data PPP. Without any further ado, I'm going to let Marta introduce herself, and Marta, her slides are going to come up now.
Okay, thank you very much, Rev, also for the invitation and for this introduction. We can move already to the second slide. As you have mentioned, I have some history in work in standards and data. About 20 years ago, although women should not speak about ages too much, I have started working in the industry on data management and standards. Then 2005 joined the European Commission, and in different contexts was dealing with research innovation in information management, IT solutions for disaster management, etc. And as a highlight, I was building up a unit dealing with data economy portfolio and establishing the big data value PPP. Since 2017, I have been in Eurostat, keeping the line on standardization work. I'm heading the unit data and metadata services and standards, have internationally leading role in the implementation of the statistical data and metadata exchange standard called SDMX, together with 6 other international organizations. And I'm representative of the European Statistical System in the executive board of the Modernizing Statistics High-Level Group. In Eurostat, since this month, I have in additional the pleasure and the task also to be the Deputy Director for Dissemination, Cooperation, and international collaboration in that sense. But more important are the examples what I would like to bring to you on the next slide. And I see as statistics as one of the potential areas profiting from the different data ecosystems. Therefore, I'm bringing 2 experiences from the statistics, which will lead me to future challenges and opportunities. The first example what I would like to address is the international exchange of statistical data. Just background information we are exchanging with World Bank, with IMF, with European Central Bank, but also with different national authorities data. This is possible through to exchange of aggregated data, and it is only possible due to semantic interoperability. What does it mean? We need to have harmonized data formats, exchange formats, classifications to understand, harmonized methodologies to come up to this data. And as a less focused element for standardization is we would need standardized or somehow unified metadata management, because without good metadata, our data is not useful. And this would be also an element. The second example what I would like to mention is that statistic is often used for decision making, either in the private sector, but mainly in the public sector, where we are building upon aggregated and processed data. Hereby, a very important experience is that we have to have trusted and standardized data management, access to data and methodology. It's important for us to get different artificial intelligence models to train our data systems and for the use of the data. It's important to ensure the transparency of the processes for the decision making, and also to get trust in the different models and activities. The next slides will outline how these future challenges from my point of view could be addressed. One is, of course, the technology support, which would be needed for standardization of data exchange. We would seek and look as future challenges to have standardized methods for embedding geolocation, geoinformation, and time aspects into the data collection. So not only to have the data, but embed in metadata or in somehow in the processes that it can be retracted later on. Very important for statistics, but for many of the different applications is cross-domain definition of reference data to ensure comparability. And hereby we see also need for standardized way of doing it. I have mentioned before as one element in the statistics, the cross-domain data exchange formats, which would be necessary if we are speaking about the data spaces. It will be important to enable everyone to reuse this data, to have exchange formats which are working and are usable across the different domains, whether it is transportation, health data, or other data to reuse for certain purposes. By the exchange formats is also a challenge that we do not know yet by the collection of the data, or very often by the automated generation of the data, for which purpose the data could be used later on. Therefore, an domain agnostic approach would be needed. And as I mentioned, a standardized way of metadata management would be necessary. In the statistic fields, we are working on harmonized metadata protocols to be delivered, but we are doing manually, best case semi-manually. And for here, we are seeking the technology companies to come up with automatized solutions. And these solutions, of course, would require standardized ways and processes. The second future challenge that I would like to address is broader access to data and standardized way of accessing data. In the statistics, we have developed a program called Trusted Smart Statistics, with the goal to have an access to data, also privately held data, but we have issues on technology and standardization. What are two challenges? What I would like to raise hereby is that we will need trained models for creating this information in addition to the data. And the statistical offices are considering this as a kind of business output, not only data, but also delivering trained models based on standardized processes and tools. The second point what I would like to mention in this context is how to apply the GDPR on data acquisition or on data access, especially by privately held data, in the form for data minimization and purpose limitation, which is required by the GDPR. So for us, it would be an interesting interesting process to dig in how the data could be processed and worked on it without moving the data to the different parties, and to develop methodology and algorithms for these. Process the data in the different information processed in cross-domain context, and to get for this harmonized metadata management. Thank you for the opportunity to share the example of statistics with you, and looking forward to possible future collaboration hereby.
Thank you very much, Marta. Excellent again, as usual. And it gives us a view, like, I mean, that there's lots of different approaches that can be made, and shows that in relation to data and the data challenge, that the GDPR, which is a regulation is already out there by the Commission, is still very important, and how we actually deploy and affect our systems and services and products, and need to be cognizant of that. Without any further ado, and to quickly, because we run out of time on this really quickly, introduce Fergal, and Fergal's going to introduce himself. Fergal's an Irishman like ourselves, so he'd be used to talking, and I'll have to probably shut him up at the end. But off you go, Fergal, anyway, and try and keep it to about 4 or 5 minutes if all possible.
Hi, thanks, Ray. So I'm Fergal Finn. I'm a standards manager with the NSAI, which is the Ireland's national standards body. We're working in the innovation policy and business development group, which predominantly looks at ICT and emerging technology standardization. Not just standards as well. We interact with government and industry and academia. Next slide. So a couple of interests, Irish interests from government have been one in the area of robotics, and the Irish government identified collaborative robotics as an enabler for digitizing Irish manufacturing. A multi-stakeholder national steering committee was created in Ireland to demystify and actualize collaborative robotics. NSAI is leading out on the revision of the ISO standard for robotics, with a particular focus on collaborative robotics. In parallel, the RD&I, the research, design, and innovation side of the business, and industry stakeholders have worked together to create a functioning Industry 4.0 spec collaborative cell, encompassing each type of collaborative robotic application with all of the safety functionality built in. And it is used then for manufacturers to come and visit and inspect the cell to see what it can do, how it does it, and how to address the safety assessments to ensure compliance with that. They've created an automation assessment tool and have an Ask Me Anything service. And this really helps companies to make decisions on automation. And it also goes as far as conducting a cost-benefit analysis, so that even though the engineers are taken by the technology, the accountants need to be taken by it too, and they can now demonstrate that. In the area of artificial intelligence, ISO and IEC have a technical committee drafting international standards for artificial intelligence. NSAI, with an Irish academic, we've been assigned a convenership for the working group for trustworthiness. We've published one international standard already. It's a technical report on the overview of trustworthiness in artificial intelligence. Trustworthiness is a focus area for artificial intelligence in Europe. As part of the Irish strategy for AI, the Irish government have a pilot project, which is a top team in AI standardization. NSAI has been tasked with leading this top team, and we're a multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder team working with companies based in Ireland, large and small, who are working in the AI area. And we're creating an AI roadmap that's supported with standards, so that it'll just make it so much easier for Irish companies to go through their AI journey and hopefully lead to very early adoption of AI. Next slide, please, Ray. Autonomous robots and collaborative robots are the fastest growing areas in industrial automation at the moment, and AI is already being used in robotics. For industrial robots, machine learning is being used for the likes of mobile robots for their navigation. As part of the safety system or the safety functionality of a robot system, though, AI would enable safety systems to distinguish other robots and machinery from humans and identify the direction of travel of that human. And the addition of that safety functionality capability, it really would allow robots to run faster and for longer. Next slide, Ray. So here's a web of the standards that are linked to an industrial robotic system. At the very top there, you can see that IEC 61508. It's the basic safety standard for complex electronics used in control systems. And the most recent version from 2010 does not recommend the use of AI in safety systems. It actually bans AI as a primary safety function. But it's badly worded because of the lack of AI expertise on the drafting committee at that time. It's being re-examined now for the 3rd edition, which is going to be published in 2021-22. And the Safety Functionality Committee and the AI Standards Committee are working jointly now on a new international standard, the technical report on safety functionality and AI systems. So that's something that's coming to us in the future. Next slide, please, Ray. The ICT international standards that are developed by the joint technical committee of ISO and IEC. And within that joint technical committee, there's a subcommittee that's drafting the 1st generation of AI international standards. There's currently 6 international standards on AI published, and there's 21 in development. Ireland is very active on this committee. We have experts in leading role in working group 2 that have published 5 standards in the area of big data reference architecture, and our man Ray has an editing role in there as well. As I said earlier, Ireland have the convenership of working group 3, and that is developing the international standards for trustworthiness in AI, and they've like 7 projects in progress at the moment, and they're looking at areas like trustworthiness, ethical and societal concerns, bias in AI, risk management, robustness of neural networks, quality requirements and the like. The next slide, then you have it. So the ISO standards are being developed to take into account the enabling technologies that support that. And the ISO standards that are being developed as an ISO horizontal, and that means that they're going to be used at as high-level standards for which all other sector-specific standards on AI will be developed. So each different sector will adopt the horizontal AI standard and develop their own industry-specific standards for AI adoption. And work has already started, by the way, on an AI management system standard, which will enable the certification of AI systems in the future, which I think is quite welcome, at least in Europe anyway. And that's me, Ray.
Thanks very much, Fergus. That was brilliant, excellent, and a very full talk there. Lots of stuff for people to get involved in. Quickly, just going to move on to Martin. I know Martin has actually put a lot of effort in just to be here today. Martin, really appreciate it. Allow you to go ahead and introduce your topic as well. Martin is chair of the Open Agile Smart Cities from Aarhus University.
Thank you, Ray. And yeah, so standards, so many standards, right? I mean, could we only have a clean slate and make something out of scratch? Many things would be easier. I come very much from the what is labeled the cities and communities side. So very much the demand side, but of course embedded. So back, Marta, also to the whole SIP program and so on back in INFSO. I'm also responsible for the roadmap for IoT for Europe, so next generation IoT, and I do standard stuff. Yeah. Please go 2 slides further. We don't have to. So OSC is global, but most members are in Europe. Now this slide is interesting. What do we do when we don't have good standards to implement? So what's happening on the, let's say, city side, but local municipality level, when you actually have the need to integrate these different sectors and share data across stakeholders and so on, well, the first thing is you ask for standards. And sure, there are some standards out there, and I think what was just shown from Ireland very, very nicely shows, okay, yeah, so you can have a big data perspective or an AI perspective, but there are so many perspectives to have, and data is just data. I mean, they don't know sectors, doesn't know the concept of a border. It's a bit like air. So it's incredibly complex. So this is the position I come from. What do we do then? And the first line and some of the initiatives here are what's happening then on the local ground. And now these guides to find ways among the many standards are being made. So the next thing is, how can we ensure that they work together? And it's not just enough to do a joint committee between ISO, IEC and ITU. Wish it were. And also we cannot just use only the ISO track, or I mean ITU, they have their own ideas, and there are so many others, W3C, IEEE and so on involved. So what we have been working on, and this is the middle part, on the European level, we have something called the livingin.eu, which is basically a lot of demand side actors who've gone together to say, okay, but we would like to at least have some minimal common ground. Then we can build on top of that. And that cuts across all the technologies and sectors. The same is happening on the UN level. The U for SSC, United for Smart Sustainable Cities and Communities, are creating a new architecture, so-called. So this idea about minimal interoperability, I think, is key. Next slide, please, Ray. You can go to the next, please. There are 5 commitments, and just to say that the technical part is actually only, well, part of the challenge here, and we're leading the technical work here. I'll come back to that in a second. But also things like monitoring, measuring. So Marta, how do we actually create regimes where we can express and follow both our targets and how we're doing, and we are leading also the work there with ESPON and DigiSer based on so extending essentially the DESI categorization to the local level. Quite complex, but also interesting. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the point is just, can we please use what exists? So the Inspire catalog, can we build on the MIMS, the minimal interoperability mechanisms that have been put forward towards the goal? So that's I think a very important notion. Next slide, please. And yeah, so we talked about, especially you, Marta, interoperability. One thing that we find in practice is needed is to minimize the interoperability requirements to what is sufficient. Then there's lots more we could do, but what is the minimal? We know that from the circuit breakers, from the firewalls in the physical realm, and we now certainly know it from the COVID-19 situation, that we cannot just have super interoperability, we die. So how can we ensure that things can be put together when needed and kept apart otherwise? Next slide, please. So our vision, and I speak now on behalf of a ton of cities and you know, companies providing for those cities and regulators around, if we could get really, really basic to say, what are these minimal mechanisms? And we have made a modest proposition here, which is now out being validated, built on the CEF, built on the Inspire, built on the ISO standards, whenever we can. And that includes personal data and fair AI. Let's try and at least define those. Next slide, please. So, and this is the last slide. I think also being, you know, responsible for putting it together, a strategic research, innovation, deployment agenda, I think we can say that we do have actually many of the mechanisms, if not all of them, to create digital twins and data spaces and so on. We do have a roadmap and also the governance around it. But what we need is to do the fitness and to roll it out, not naively, but to make it actually hit the reality. And there, I think, and we can perhaps come back to that, I think the move to the edge, so where we don't put everything in a cloud, but really ensure that the the twins can live at the edge. The data can be shared in a context and only in a context, unless you need to do more. I think that's going to be a lot of the work that we will be doing in the coming years. Thank you. I don't hear you, Ray. I think you may be muted.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Martin, not just for telling me to put my mic back on, but also for actually getting us back that we at least have some time at the end that we can have a bit of a chat. That this time goes by. I mean, with panel sessions like this, we only have 45 minutes. We need an hour and a half just to get going. So what we'll have to do here is to be actually, with the time that's left, I'm going to just throw away all the big questions that we prepared and just have a look to WOVA to see, just double check his ranking. There's no particular highly ranked question in WOVA worth asking. So I'm going to ask each of you, because we only have 5 minutes. So it gives you about a minute and a half each to wrap up. And to give me a takeaway moment, something that you want to sell to the audience in relation to standardization, AI, data, robotics, foresight, data governance. You have at it, each of you. I'm starting with at the beginning. Takeaway from Thomas, so something that you just want to leave people thinking about, because I know you need to be somewhere else very, very soon.
Yeah, I will do my best. Coming back to Marta's comment, I like this also because digitalization needs interoperability needs standards. And now I'm coming back also what Martin said. It's quite important that you have not to cook the ocean, so to say, so to focus what is needed for interoperability. That's one takeaway. And the other takeaway is for me, and coming from manufacturing industry, speaking about the AI, data and robotics, PPP, which is really driving me when you have some kind of reinforcement learning industry where you modify because you make it more efficient, more sustainable or whatever the machine, and you have it done in the regulated industry, for example, then you have to think about it, how we're doing this. And I think to bring together the AI, the benefits of AI, with needs from regulated industry, with machine rules, or let's say functional safety in this area. This is really what's driving me, where we have to think about this. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Thomas. And move straight on to Marta. Marta, your takeaway idea or phrase?
Thank you. I would like to address the diversity and the large number of different standardization organizations. And I think it would be good to get a kind of governance for it. And of course, one way is to get leadership by getting the craft out of the data spaces and the European actions. But it would be good to get specialization on the one hand, but also an aggregated way of these different standards, that we do not have 5 or 10 committees dealing with the same, one for the health data, other one for the other data, but let's try to find a governance.
Thanks very much, Marta. Over to you, Fergal.
Yeah, I think the governance part of that is very important, and I guess what I have been seeing in recent years is how the different standards organizations work together with ITU, ISO, W3C, how they're all working together, and the little chunk that they take each and try and standardize that area, and then how the companies take each of those standards and build them into their product. And that's quite interesting. And I think that certainly from the Irish government side, what we want to do is we want to show industries how they come together, because it's all very well for a big company who have that engineering experience and ICT experience to do that for themselves. But it's the smaller companies that we want to empower to be the adopters of AI and not just AI, but all the technologies that go with it. IT governance is absolutely hugely important in that, as are all the other enablers on AI. But if I could bring that to the smaller companies so that they didn't have to figure it out themselves, that would be a great achievement for me.
Okay, thanks very much, Fergal. And Martin?
I can make it very simple. I think we should define some minimal interoperability mechanisms, and we should all use them, including they are accessible to smaller companies, smaller organizations. I think we should find these fora, as you say, Marta and Thomas, where we can bring both sides of the market and the regulators together. I'm not counting on the SDOs to do that.
Okay, thanks very much to you guys. And nothing else really for me to do except to just, as a parting gesture, to thank everybody, to Thomas and to Marta, to Martin and to Fergal for coming together and for helping us out, to our sponsors, and to all of the people that have made these last 3 days possible. It's been my pleasure to host this event, and I hope we'll be seeing you all again at the EBDVA event next year. And please God, it will be in person, and we can have a cup of coffee. Thanks everybody for joining, and without any further ado, we'll say goodbye to the audience, and yeah, so be safe everybody, take care.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. See you, Ray. Thank you.